on the chair of our board, Tito Jackson, to welcome us all.
Thank you so much, Theo. I want to first thank Theo and Phoebe for the amazing work that they do on a day-to-day basis. We punch way above our weight, even including the several pounds that I add to the organization. But we absolutely, on a day-to-day basis, punch way above our weight in terms of impact and really making a real difference as we see, not only in the New England area where we started, but globally. So I'm very, very thankful to be here. My name is Tito Jackson, and I'm on the board. And I just wanted to speak a little bit about the context of where we are today. As all of you know, and we read about on a day-to-day basis, we have inflation that is at record levels, which mean regular people are having a more and more difficult time. We know that there are disparities around race and that cut across race as well as gender in terms of people's earnings. Right here in the city of Boston, in 2015, there was a study done that was called The Color of Wealth, and it looked at the disparity between net assets net earnings in the city of Boston, the median net worth of folks. And in Boston, the median net worth of a white family is $247,500. The median net worth of a Black family is $8. And that pregnant pause is for a reason. And so we as a country at this important time really have to decide who and what we are. And so we have an opportunity today to deal with our dysfunction, to deal with our disparities, and take on what our amazing guests are bringing to the table, this mentality of an American dream, this promise of American dream. And the question is, are only rich folks going to be the ones who get to dream and have their and so I think it's absolutely in its 50th, nearly 50th year, really take this very important issue on. I like to refer to these conversations as radical civil dialogues, and with a stress on civil, because we also live in a country where many of the things that we are discussing today, folks have a really hard time being able to see through the lens of others' eyes. So I think it's really important that this program is occurring today with folks from all around the world, many generations, race, ethnic background, and the like. So I am amped, absolutely excited to hear the amazing voices of Abigail Disney. You go. I wanted to say this to you. I don't know if this is appropriate. You go, girl, because what you were able to put on the table and in front of our eyes is exactly what we need to see. And I would also note, Abigail, you're who we need to hear it from. I think it's absolutely critical that people who are in positions of power and influence have the courage to step forward amongst their peers and to use their voice. So I am just absolutely elated to have you here, and also Julie Gorte, and I hope I said the last name right, that we want to hear what it means to have real equity and equality, the shareholders and owners of companies, but the workers. And I'm a big fan I wanted to go ahead and pass it over to the amazing, and actually I'm going to go off camera because it sounds like I have a bandwidth issue. But I want to introduce Nicole Ellis, who I'm a big fan. Nicole is an awesome, fantastic, amazing sister who is the first digital anchor for PBS NewsHour. And prior to that, she was a journalist with the venerable newspaper, the Washington Post. She also happens to be the daughter of one of our longtime friends, and actually one of my mentors, and someone who tells me to get on a bike every single day, Rodney Ellis. So I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to Nicole to take over and guide us along this trip.
Hello, everyone. That's right. I have very big shoes to fill if my dad is on this call. You know, I look forward to you giving me a report card shortly after. So I want to kick off this conversation really with a question. I mean, this is all about the future of work and really understanding the dynamic of how privilege and accessibility plays an integral role in our understanding of not only work, but our understanding of our pursuit of the American dream, what that is, and looking at it with a more critical eye in terms of practicality and realistic achievement of that at the intersections of income, race, and equality. And so for our incredible panelists, Julie, Tito literally just asked how to pronounce your last name, but Julie, can you actually tell us how to pronounce your last name really quickly? Can you hear me?
Yes, I just had to find the mute button. I'm sorry. It's Gorte.
Julie, Gorte, and Abigail Disney, thank you both so much for joining me and for joining this incredible circle. I want to start off by asking both of you, was there a formative or pivotal, incredibly, was there an illuminating moment in terms of you realizing or understanding that the American dream is not accessible to everyone, and that there are other factors, whether it's race, gender, income, socioeconomic status, that plays a factor in someone's ability to not only realize their dreams, but realize the American dream? Let's start with you, Julie.
Sure. I think the moment that I can remember is when I was working my way through college, and I worked in a summer job for the U.S. Forest Service. And I always thought that that what I wanted, what would make me happy, was to be outside, to be hiking and, in gorgeous places, having these lovely views and lakes to canoe on and so forth. So I had this summer job with the Forest Service in Oregon, and my day job was cleaning toilets in a campground. And I realized then that if you aren't part of the privileged people, and believe me, I grew up with white privilege. I didn't know it, but I did. I mean, I have so much better of a life than the people who grew up in true poverty and faced discrimination every day and couldn't afford to let their son go out on a run because he might get murdered. None of that happened to me, but I still realized that if I weren't a member of the elite, I couldn't enjoy those things. That it was not as much fun if I didn't have, leisure and money. So I think that was one of the moments that I remember where I decided that I wanted to dedicate my life to transition to a truly sustainable economy.
So just so you all have it, there are bios and pieces in the chat that you can find everyone in. And Abigail wanted to hear about your experience, and if there is a formative experience.
I think I didn't have a single epiphany or moment. I think I had a lot of epiphanies and moments that went into, sorry about the dogs. There's nothing I can do about that. They're really awful. So they just come with the territory. But I think my whole life I've been forming these ideas that, because I grew up in quite a protected space, and wealthy people protect themselves not just in terms of people threatening them. They protect themselves from what they don't want to see. And I think I spent a lot of years in that bubble with very thick walls, And you have to really get outside of it. So for me, it sort of began when I went off to college and started to meet a variety of people. And then when I came to New York City to do graduate school, and it really became so clear to me just how, how many people were sleeping on the sidewalk, quite frankly, and how many people just couldn't find housing, and how many, you can't really hide from it here in New York. Los Angeles is an easier thing. And I didn't want to look away. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So just to kind of, obviously we have some great bios for you in the chat, but to bring it back to how this informs your work and sort of illuminating how this relationship, privilege or a desire to understand it, how does that inform your work? Let's start with you, and then we'll go to you, Julie. But how has this sort of the work of understanding privilege, as you put it, Abby, how has that informed your path and your professional journey?
Right. I've had a long journey to understanding the difference between privilege and entitlement, and I've come to believe that privilege is something that just happens, but entitlement is when you kind of absorb privilege and think of it as natural and divine right. And that's a really important difference. I was the third of 4 children, so I think I was naturally destined to be always thinking about what was fair. I never really absorbed a sense of entitlement because of the deep unfairness that I could see around me outside of my family and in the world. It just, I don't know how to explain it, except that it just did not sit right with me. It didn't feel right. And I could not shake that emotion. And so everything I've done in my adult life really has been in response to that feeling of, it's a very primal and not very sophisticated feeling, that things were really deeply unfair. And that if I were to just relax into all of my privileges, then I was just simply a part of a system that was deeply unfair.
So The American Dream and Other Fairy Tales is an example of that kind of work, but that is not your first documentary and certainly isn't your last. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the others that really kind of get at this in different ways?
Right. Well, I mean, when my children were young, I stayed mostly around New York City to do a lot of the work that I was doing. And I ended up sort of knowing women who worked at the grassroots. So when I did finally start traveling internationally in my 40s, I discovered a story in Liberia, which became a film called Pray the Devil Back to Hell. And I think I was able to see that story as a real story because of all the work I'd done locally with grassroots women, because it felt credible to me. And all the journalists and the news people had been there. They'd heard the story. Nobody had done anything about it because it felt like impossible. So Pray the Devil Back to Hell was my very first film. It was about the Liberian women and how they were able to organize around ending the civil war there. The woman who was almost exactly 11 years ago, 2 days ago, won the Nobel Peace Prize, the leader of the women there, Lema Bowie. That film also became a series for PBS. We made 4 additional films called Women, War, and Peace, which was about the role women play in modern wartime. And we ended up making a second round of 4 more Women, War, and Peace films a few years later. I decided I wanted to direct on my own. I had produced all of those. And my first directing film was called The Armor of Light. And it was about a pro-life Christian evangelical, very conservative guy. I approached him and I asked him how his pro-life ideology and language comported with gun policy in the conservative world. And he didn't have a good answer for me. And he wondered why it was the way it was too. So we followed him for about 2 years, and that became a film of basically watching a person learn and change on camera. And he really did utterly change on camera. He's been in the news more recently because he kind of came clean about the fact that Sam Alito leaked the Hobby Lobby decision to him in 2014. And so if you've seen any of the news about that, that's Reverend Schenk is the person from my film, The Armor of Light. It's iTunes and Amazon and all the usual places. It's a really interesting film to see now during this moment of deep polarization.
Thank you so much, Abby. Julie, I want to go to you because obviously your expertise is exceptionally different, but also kind of a part of this conversation around not only becoming self-aware about privilege, and really becoming an advocate for understanding it, actually applying it. Julie, tell us a bit about how your work is informed by this relationship to work and equality and inequality.
Yeah. Thanks. So I have never made a film, but I love the ones Abby has made. So we're on the same page, at least in terms of our concerns. I spent about the first half of my career working in government, and I always thought that I could use my energy and my talent to make the world a better place. So I worked for Congress, I worked for EPA on the Kyoto Protocol and on getting rid of a pesticide that was causing women to have abortions, spontaneous miscarriages in Oregon when it was used. It was actually one that was also used in Vietnam to defoliate the forests there. And then I got a call from a headhunter who said, I want to get you into the private sector. And my first thought was, what on earth can I do in the private sector to make the world a better place? I mean, this is my mission and this is what I do. And so he said, I just want you to look at the job description. And so I realized then that you could actually use the money in the private, so you could use the tools of capitalism to make the world better. This was an epiphany, if you will, for me. There are a lot of tools of capitalism and we generally don't use them to make the world a better place, at least not intentionally. It sometimes has that effect unintentionally, but if you really mean it, there is a mechanism to do it using capitalism. So sustainable investing became a place where I could use my concerns about inequality, discrimination, harassment, climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, environmental degradation, worker safety. There's all kinds of product safety, all kinds of things that we all want together. But the economic system is less and less inclined to give it to us unless we do something about it. I got my PhD in economics and absorbed all of the Adam Smith you can possibly absorb, and was taught that there is this invisible hand that if you just use the market mechanisms, this invisible hand it's as though it was guided by an invisible hand to make everybody as well off as they possibly could be within the system. Well, when you add greed into that little formula, then you get an invisible fist. And that really helps to keep people down. What I have found working in sustainable finance, I am a dot connector by nature. So I collect studies from academia, from finance, from wherever I can get them, as long as they have a replicable methodology that connect the attributes of sustainability to financial outcomes. I have about 1,000 of them now, and all of them show that the more sustainable you are, the better you tend to perform financially. Now, Wall Street has the attention span of a mosquito. So yes, you can always make more money in the short run if you're willing to trample people and to trample the environment and all that. But in the long run, if you do better by your workers, by the communities, by stakeholders, by shareholders, you actually do better financially, either in terms of risk reduction or in terms of actual performance. So this is something where I feel like if more people brought these tools, the tools of capitalism and finance, to the task of making the world more sustainable, we can do it. It's not impossible. We have a pathway. It's hard, and you can't be into, it's not an instant gratification thing, but it does work.
Julie, can you break that down for us a little bit more? And this is a question for both of you, and then we're going to pivot to questions from the incredible members of our circle. And I see a few of you chiming in the chat, so please tee yourselves up whenever you are ready to ask a question. But Julie, I want to start with you on this last question of mine, which is, how do we make, with everything that you've just said in mind in terms of understanding some of the economic factors and really the culture of finance in America, how do we make the American dream more accessible, and really the idea of the American dream more accessible, both on a national and a global level?
there are a lot of tools that we have in our toolkit financially, and there, I'll just mention one or two of them. So the more we invest in companies that treat their workers well, that pay living wages, that give benefits, family-friendly benefits and worker-friendly benefits, to the extent that those companies have a license to operate based on their market cap, it helps them. It doesn't have, when you invest in stock, you're not creating a new job necessarily, you're just investing in a stock. But if that stock trades at a premium compared to the discount, if they're competitors that don't treat their workers well are getting, I think it does help to reinforce the idea that this is an enterprise-wide thing. And boy, did we learn that during COVID, when the people who were the most important people for the corporation were not the 1,000 VPs in their little nice cubicles, that they were in fact the clerks and the baggers and the janitors and the frontline people, the nurses. Those are the people we had to have. The other thing you can do is this amazingly exorbitant and absolutely ridiculous executive compensation, what we pay to CEOs, and how many multiples of what the median worker gets that we pay CEOs. You can vote against that in the proxy. If you own the stock of the corporation, you can say, I don't like your executive comp plan. You're rewarding your executives anytime the market goes up, whether they did anything to do it to get it or not. It needs to be tied to performance, and that performance measure needs to be not just the price of the stock or total shareholder return, but things like equality, diversity, fairness, etc. And
Phoebe,
having a net zero goal.
Yeah.
Phoebe is
Sorry.
no, you're great. Thank you. Phoebe's putting a lot of great resources, pointing to the things that Julie is saying. For me, I mean, that's an incredible lesson. I'm by no means an economist. I went to journalism school, not business school, for a reason. And so there are some really great resources that have been vetted by Julie in the chat. Abby, you touch on a lot of the things that Julie mentions in the film, and really in sort of a broad sense of trying to put together or paint a picture for people of this landscape of not only inequality, but how some of the workers at Disneyland, ended up at the bottom end of such a broad spectrum between haves and have-nots, with Disneyland as a proxy for the country. What's your insight and your thought process around how we can make the American dream more accessible, and particularly, thinking through your conversations with and interviews with Sam, Ralph, Trina, Ellie, and Artemis in your film?
Yeah, well, Julie brought up so much that I'd love to talk about. One thing that's really important, and one of the things I tried to talk about in the film, is that that we are at a point that's unique in history, that a conscious effort was made 50 years ago to alter the ground rules for the way corporations operate, and they were successfully shifted. And it wasn't just that legislation was changed to do things like lower taxes dramatically, both on individuals at the high end as well as on corporations themselves, deregulate everywhere it was possible to deregulate, just create an almost totally unmonitored environment for corporations. So, which is why our air is dirty and our water is dirty and so much. So all of that happened, but we also eviscerated the means by which, the only means, credible means by which workers get to speak as a group for themselves. And for their rights. And so workers got less and less powerful. And so their interests got served less and less. All of this was happening while there was also a very conscious norm shifting that went on, very conscious norm shifting, where a person like Milton Friedman and others in the Chicago school were able to put forward this idea that only shareholders matter, that there are no other constituencies to care about. And, because of the way that tended to privilege the powerful and tended to reward only the people at the top, corporations took that and they ran with it. And they ran with it and ran with it. What's so interesting is what you never see, there are plenty of people who will defend how quote unquote rational the CEO compensation is, for instance, as one example. They never hold themselves to their own standards. I'm a big shareholder in the Walt Disney Company. It's trading today at 94. 2 years ago, it was trading at 189. And at no point in the 2 years between when it was trading at 189 and now when it's trading at 94, has anyone suggested that the C-suite not come home with multi-million-dollar compensation packages. So, you know, if you want to justify to me that you're worth these multi-million-dollar packages, then you had better be willing to take the risk of not getting paid that way when it's not going well. And that's not happening. So actually, we've never really done all the things that we allege we're doing because we've never held our own feet to the fire by our own measures. You know, Adam Smith would so not approve of what's happening in this marketplace because he was a much more nuanced thinker. And while he may have said, you know, like if everybody pursues their own self-interest, then the whole place will get richer. He always said that this should happen within reason, within cultural norms, within laws. He didn't say, go buy your way into the political process so you can adjust all the laws so that anything that is a headwind against you doesn't exist anymore. Share buybacks are a great example of this problem. You know, yes, they've enriched shareholders, but have they really added to the values of companies? You know, just because a company puts $11 billion into a share buyback and the shares go up accordingly, did the company actually do anything that created more value or added more jobs? No, that's why until the mid-1980s, share buybacks were illegal because they were considered market manipulation. So we, first of all, the way, for instance, tax payments have become even almost a little optional. They've been gamified by most corporations. That's evidence of the fact that there's been a massive shift in norming. And I think a lot of people poo-poo the idea that norms have a value. But we've always had greedy people. We've always had people who take advantage of the system. That's just nothing new. But they were always held a little bit in check by this old-fashioned thing called shame. And what's been removed in part by this idea that, like, no, actually, the best thing is for everybody to just go after their own selfish self-interest. It was moral cover. It offered moral cover to the economic elites to just simply drop the notion of shame and go for whatever they could go for. And that we're living in the result of that. So I think that if we're going to try and reverse that trend, we're going to have to think about how to, first of all, re-legislate a lot of regulation, re-empower things like our antitrust and our tax collection agencies, and rethink norming and talk differently about what we expect from our CEOs. We talk about Elon Musk like he's some kind of superhero because he's enriched himself. Well, I guess I'm happy for him that he's rich. I actually know enough about having a lot of money to know that actually that's not a happy life. But okay, fine. But that doesn't make him a hero. The mere fact of his wealth does not make him a hero. Let's think about what it is that we say we admire, who we admire, why we admire them. Let's rethink how we're teaching values to our young people.
Thank you both so much. I'm going to pivot to questions from our circle members, and we encourage all of you to chime in and be a part of this conversation. I will basically be, calling on you to ask your own questions. If you would like for me to ask on your behalf, because it's understandable, some of us do get stage fright, just make sure you put that disclaimer either on your question or when you sort of raise your ability. But let's start off with Judy Matthews. You have a question for Julie. Please unmute yourself and go ahead and ask yourself.
Hi, this question is for Julie Gorte. I'm wondering if you can explain your vision of what the intersection of corporate performance and labor unions is. I'm not hearing echoed in your explanation of using the tools of capitalism anything about the involvement of workers.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Judy. Thank you for asking it. There are a lot of people on Wall Street or on any Wall Street, whether you want to call it the street in London or anybody other stock markets, who see labor unions as maybe a drag on performance, and they're fine with companies getting rid of unions, which we largely did during the Reagan administration and leading up to that. Union membership has been going down in the United States, or the proportion of unionized workers has been going down since the 50s. we actually prefer corporations that will work with their workers, whether they are in unions or not. And if they have anti-union activities, we tend to avoid investing in them. I think these are companies where they're saying essentially, you don't want you to have any power, because if you do, that could crimp our operations. These are also often corporations that do have multi-million-dollar compensation packages for what we call the NEOs, the named executive officers. There are top five paid people in the corporation, and then can also have fairly sizable bonuses for people at what we would consider sort of upper and mid management. But if you're not letting your workers have their voice, you're not going to ever hear them. And if you don't hear them, then you lose a lot of competitiveness, to be perfectly honest. The people who work in the stores, on the ground, on the rides, cleaning things up can make your business look a lot better. They can give you a lot better reputation with customers because they see them a whole lot more often than the executives do. And if they are happy and they feel valued at their work, they're going to give your whole corporation a better look and a better customer presence. And there's so many of them that just don't seem to know that. So, when Amazon workers start unionizing, we're like, good, go, do it.
Nadine, you had a great question that you posed in the chat. If you would like to unmute yourself, wanted to give you an opportunity to pose that question to our incredible panelists. Nadine Hack.
Hi, Nicole. Hi, Abby. Hi, Julie. So I was just wondering if you each could maybe think about and share with us your thoughts on how each of us can get the word out to the largest number of people, whether they're investors or not, because obviously most people don't even have the means to invest. That they still can take actions to make companies and the governments that regulate them or don't more accountable and more responsible. And if we were to suggest one act for them to take, what do you think would be the most powerful one?
That's a good question. Judy, you want to go first? Julie? Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm either Judy or Julia to most people. Apparently the name Julie is the least favorite alternative. I think just off the top of my head, if you let me think for 10 minutes, I'll think of 10 more of these. But I think the one thing I would say is vote, right? So if you do happen to own stock, vote your proxy. I realize that reading a proxy statement is the best cure for insomnia in the entire world. But if you can get through it, there are actually ways that you can tell a corporation what you think. The other thing you can do, and we do need to regulate, Abigail is absolutely right about that. We need to give government the power to stand up to money, which is what corporations bring to the table. And we had Citizens United that said, hey, money is speech. So you're entitled to spend as much as you want, on electing candidates and on issue lobbying and so forth. Then, vote for the right people to get into public office. The people who aren't afraid to use the tools of government to create a more just and equal society, even if it costs some greedy person a few dollars every year.
I also think unions are key to turning this around. I mean, if you watch Howard Schultz right now, you would think that unions were all carrying daggers and trying to stab him in the heart. It's the scariest, terriblest thing. And across the tech sector, they're all unanimous about this idea. All a union is a democracy at the working class level and collective bargaining. My grandfather was a lovely man and a very sweet guy, and he loved the people who worked for him, and he wanted to pay them well, and he did. But his workers all walked out on him in 1941, and he was pissed. And his attitude was, wait, I'm being so nice. Why are you doing this? He was a paternalist. He was a textbook paternalist. He wanted to pay people well because he wanted to pay people well, not because it was their right to be paid well and fairly. And that difference is everything. That's what Howard Schultz is doing right now. That's what Bezos and Amazon are kind of like, but we're so nice. Look at how nice we are. That's nonsense.
Right.
So, regular people need to patronize companies whenever possible that are unionized. If you want to help Starbucks out and they ask you your name on your coffee, say union, say your name is union, because every time they call out your name, they're going to yell union. And go, go to places, encourage it, stop talking unions down. They are the best thing that ever happened to the working class in this country. And so we need to rebuild our union movement, and we need to stop participating in the denigration of workers. If you just think about it this way, collective bargaining, absent collective bargaining, we are all left to the tender mercies of Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. And as not a world I want to live in.
I am smiling because as I was watching the film, Abby, you do a great job of being so polite and so nice. And I was like, this isn't the lady who spoke to my journalism class. She's like, super. Yes, see this nice. Yes, let me see that. But, get back to some of the questions from our circle members. So Ashley Pincharo, I hope I pronounced your last name right, but you had a great question here in the chat and want to give you the opportunity to ask it to our panelists.
Sure, thanks Nicole, and great job with the last name, it's tricky. So I was just asking, so I live in Boston. I grew up in the Deep South, and I grew up in a household where there was, a lot of skepticism around unions. So I guess one of the things that I'm asking is, what's the most effective way for workers within these corporations to advocate for themselves in these spaces where unions don't exist, or in spaces where folks may feel uncomfortable with unionizing? Is there another option, or really is it about changing the narrative around unions in those spaces altogether?
I would say it starts with changing the narrative, and that's both at a personal and a public level. And then there are para-union organizations. There are different ways to organize. In Europe, a lot of countries are organizing sector by sector. So all the waiters get one union. And so, and that's a much more sensible way to organize, so that all the waiters are negotiating for something with all the restaurants, and all the restaurants have sort of the same situation. That would be a much more sensible way for our country to start thinking about work. That, it's interesting because our country, in the 50 to 60 years where this big economic shift was happening, really shifted from being a manufacturing to being a service economy. And if you look at service work, 50, 60 years ago, the reason it was less well paid is because it was primarily held and done by people of color and by women and by immigrants, right? And so we just naturally assume that a teacher isn't well paid. It's assumed. We assume that a waitress is not well paid. We assume that anybody in the service sector is not well paid. The only reason that a pipe fitter or a plumber was well paid was because, as men, they made the argument that they were supporting families. Well, all workers support themselves and support families and deserve to be treated with the same dignity, whether they're a pipe fitter or a waitress or a hotel maid. So we need really to do some rethinking about who these unions are right now, who are speaking up for workers. Who do they represent? Because the ones that I was talking to at Disneyland were SEIU and Unite. And SEIU and Unite represent hotel maids and waitresses and people who are generally the worst paid and least respected people in the workplace. And we literally need a massive cultural inversion of how we understand the value of those kinds of workers.
Hello, I'm still here, but chiming in from my backup computer. I wanted to also welcome your co-director. I believe she's here. I think Kathy Hughes is on the call.
Kathy, are you here?
I think I saw her on there, but if so, I wanted to give her a second to chime in as well and just quickly introduce herself. I realize this is totally off script, but thought I'd ask.
I don't see her.
Hi.
Oh, there you are.
I've just been listening. It's a wonderful conversation and running back and forth and doing other things too. But so I don't even know what I would be chiming in about.
Well, at the very least, an introduction to just say a quick hello. I will let you or Abby do the honors of just a quick, co-director and your work together or something along those lines.
Great, thank you. Yeah, no, I directed this film with Abby, and it has been thrilling to see the attention that this really important subject is getting. And I caught the tail end of what Abby was just saying about how we really need to rethink what it means to be working in America these days, because upwards of half of American workers are making low wages, and that's and struggling to make ends meet, and that's really unacceptable. So
Thank you. Thank you all so much. I see a question here from
We lost your sound. Oh no, we lost you.
Am I still here? Can you see
Oh, there
me?
you
hear
are.
me?
Okay, you're
Okay,
back.
all right. Okay, not unmuted anymore, or not muted anymore. I saw a quick comment and question here from Diane. I'm not seeing Diane's last name, but it was just in the chat. Wanted to give you, Diane Dion Wrigley wanted to give you an opportunity to ask your question if you have one.
Yeah, I was trying to unmute. It's Diane Dillon Ridgely, and there's so many friends and colleagues. Julie and I were on the NACEP committee with Joan Bavaria back in the mid-90s. Nadine Hack has been at this forever. Also, I see Mary from the Yale. I'm not going to remember everybody's name, and I'm not going to try and go through all of them. I wrote two things. One, I'll just call myself a mentee and devotee of Joan Bavaria, Bella Abzug. We saw that this past weekend that Dorothy, who was one of the founders of Ms., passed away. We are the daughters and goddaughters and legacies of all that. But Nadine wanted me to, Abigail, Nadine wanted me to talk about what I put in the web. I went to elementary school in Kansas City, Missouri. The school was called D.A. Holmes, but it had been the Benton Elementary School. It was segregated. And I ended up in a classroom in the 6th grade, sitting in the desk. When I opened my desk, there was carved Walt Disney, because it's the same school he had attended, Benton. And so I did the research, even as a 12-year-old or 11-year-old. And we were inherited as Black students, the hand-me-down desk that had been there when it was Benton Elementary School. And I just thought it's almost ironic that I now chair the board at IEN, the Intentional Endowments Network, as well as the CL, the Center for International Environmental Law, and all of these women. And yes, 3 people have noted how gender positively unbalanced this is. I now refer to it as good women and good non-women who have understood this. The question that I put in, and I'd like someone to deal with this because I was participating in a Chatham House thing. I find it interesting in journalism and newspapers and the press, we talk about the business section. Where do we have the worker section? We have, quote, as a society sort of handed over the tools by allowing that it is business and that somehow that does not include workers. And I found that particularly in Europe, the union workers first said to me, why do you continue to allow this to go on in the United States? We start from a point of unbalance structurally. We've got to change a lot of that architecture as well as changing the language that we use, because we've already given over 50% of the table when we don't insist that there is an inherent equality that hasn't been put on the table. And I just last thing, this past Saturday was listening to the Nobel Peace Prize. Many of us had a really dear friend, Wangari Maathai, who in 2004 received the Nobel Prize. I was there, and I remember we closed on the Saturday ceremony with singing "We Shall Overcome," and she received her Nobel Prize on the 40th anniversary of Martin Luther King's having received his in 1964. The threads of all of this have been there, but it is now time for us, whether you want to say we sew them together, braid them together, whatever, but we now must, I mean, literally must for the future generations, not allow the dens of industry, quote, quote, to continue to exploit the resources and our future. And I always say, we as women have birthed the 21st century. This must be the gender century. Somewhere in there was a question. So please comment.
Well, you did touch on the role of the business press, and I will say that, you know, I started speaking up in 2018 about CEO pay, and I kind of started speaking up by accident. And so when I was getting a lot of attention paid to me around that, I tried to always loop in some discussion about pay at the ground level, because I don't think those are separate issues. And the folks in the business press, a little bit weren't sure how to talk about the two things at the same time. They had been so habituated to the idea that this was for somebody else on some other beat. And they were so habituated to talking about CEO pay as a multiple of median worker pay. But of course, at every single company, no matter what the median worker pay is, the people at the very bottom are also working for the same company, engaged in the same enterprise, critical parts of the success of that same enterprise. Why is the tether not all the way connected to the bottom? And that's because we've allowed people at the top to come to believe themselves to be better, more interesting, more important, more valuable, different in a really important way. And you know, in the quiet pushing that I was doing before I made this film about Disney workers' pay, the pushback I got from management again and again and again was almost perverse. It was perverse in the way that a racist is perverse, in the sense that I have something so deep and so visceral against these people. The last thing on this earth I will do is put money in their hands.
Yeah.
I will give them an education program. I'll give them a bus ride to the work. I'll give them 15 minutes of a coffee break. I'll give them more bathroom time. I will do anything except the one thing they need, which is money. And I came to believe that there's a level of bigotry in the business community that is not unlike racism, in that the people who work for these huge salaries look upon the people who come in on the hourly level as peons, as not human, as not like them. And that's a big problem.
It's part of your entitlement comment.
Yeah.
Post privilege is bad, but entitlement is poisonous.
Exactly right.
Totally. Yeah, there's a kind of
Julie, I want to give you.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Julie.
Oh, okay.
I was just saying, answer.
Thank you. I think there's a sort of social Darwinism in a lot of it. I mean, it's kind of, if I'm rich, I must be smart, you know, and I think a lot of people in the sort of middle and upper management of corporations have sort of talked themselves into the idea that they, you know, are brilliant because their corporation is doing well, or they've made a lot of money or something like that. And it's not, a lot of times it's not about them. I mean, it would happen anyway. If you look at a market that is where the investors are ebullient and they're investing in everything, the prices of everything pretty much go up, whether the corporation screws up or not. It's when you see a downturn, when you start to be able to distinguish between really good management and really, frankly, lousy management. But, you know, we can't continue to sort of keep voting for and, you know, approving the compensation packages of people who are basically born on third base and go through life thinking they hit a triple. There needs to be more of a meritocracy. How you accomplish that, I think, is through individuals, you know, and sadly, there's not a way for us to perturb that en masse, except to say, I'm going to vote against your executive comp plan. But you don't determine who the senior vice presidents are, no matter, you know, unless you're the president or the CEO of corporations.
You know, just
I think, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Julie, go ahead.
No.
Just to add to that, it's interesting that the Disney shareholders have twice voted Bob Iger's compensation down. Right. Yep. And the really unfortunate thing that we have to look at is that shareholder resolutions are not
binding. That's right.
And so the board went ahead and paid him anyway. But the other important thing about this idea that they see the people working at the bottom is not entirely human. They're like the roaches you have to tolerate to take care of the dirty work and the toilet scrubbing and all the rest of that. Disney forever pulled people up into management from the very bottom, maids, housekeepers, janitors. Everybody had the opportunity to move into management if you showed the company what you were about, and they wanted you there because they understood how enriching for management it was to have somebody who worked for real at the ground level and face to face with the customers. And there was a point in the 80s when everything changed in this country around business, but that is one of the practices that changed the most quickly. And so what they now have is this permanent underclass of people paid at the bottom. And then they bring in at the very bottom of management level, people who just finished their little BA in business administration or their little MA in business administration. And they've never done anything. They're 20 somethings, barely have beards most of the time. And they stay, what they do is they cycle them through, like every 7 or 8 weeks, they move a manager over to another thing. So they never know anything about the job they're managing. They certainly don't have the sophistication or the experience to be able to manage people who are older than they are. And yet from that position, and by the way, they're cycled through really quickly, specifically so they won't develop personal relationships that they are seen as weakening of a manager's toughness. They're pulled up into all the way up to the top ranks from that position. So they have stopped entirely the moving of people up in the company. And so you come in as a worker and you know that this is the only place you'll ever be. There is no up from here. So even according to the American Dream's own terms of service, it's not working anymore. It just doesn't happen. Even if that's not a rational dream and everybody doesn't move up and there should be people not starving at the bottom and so forth, it's not happening.
I wanted to, hopefully you all can hear me, but I wanted to chime in and I have a question myself, and then I'll come back to some of our circle questions as well. But Abby, as I was watching the film, it was very clear to me that the audience was not necessarily people from marginalized communities, people who understand privilege and how systemic racism or the history of systemic racism informs how disparity works in America. And I wanted to hear from both you and Julie, we can start with you, Abby, how that went into the making of the film and the intention of that part. I think, as I was watching the film, I was like, this is not for people of color in the same sense, or people who are very read in on or understand or live and experience like how privilege works to their disadvantage. But it really is for, as you say, the Tom, Dicks, Harrys, and both Bobs, in terms of like providing them, like leading them to water in the sense of understanding. I wanted to hear about your, I guess, the self-awareness and that intention and articulating it the way you did in the film. And Julie, when it comes to the financial literacy of sustainable investing, how that informs how you approach different people or communicate to different people how money works. Let's start with you, Abby, and then I can repeat it if that would be helpful for you, Julie, as well.
Well, I just would say, I hope that the film appeals to workers who are on the fence about organizing and becoming unionized. I hope it speaks to them as well. And we're certainly using it that way where we can. But yes, it also is for the Tom, Dicks, Harrys, and Marys who run corporate America. I just wrote an op-ed for CNN.com based on an Oxfam international study that showed that there are 125 billionaires whose pooled investments create as much greenhouse gases as all of France. So like, just for 1 second, 125 individual human beings responsible for the greenhouse gases, as many greenhouse gases as France, right? So I do think that there has to be some conversation happening among people with wealth about the disproportionate amount of change that they can make should they decide to disrupt and problematize their very comfortable position in the world. So it's like, yes, it's a teeny tiny demographic I'm speaking to, and not everybody can just write an email to Bob Iger. I recognize that, but there are people who can write an email to the CEO who are not doing it now. There are shareholders who are not voting their proxies. There are people sitting on boards of directors of petroleum companies who know perfectly well what's happening and are doing nothing. And if 20 of those 125 billionaires chose to be disruptive and complicated and traitorous and just go in the opposite direction, the amount of disproportionate change that they could create in the world would be something really amazing.
Thank you so much. And really great point. Like definitely sort of painting the picture of the argument for organizing as well. Julie, I want to kind of pose this question to you in terms of how you approach and identify different people in terms of having them, not only encouraging them to invest sustainably, but also understanding the nuance of why that's important.
So I'm not a salesperson. I'm, the person who provides the stuff that salespeople say. But these days there's sort of a wellspring of hope, I guess, in the financial world. It used to be, most people see finance as a kind of witch. It's like, it's really important, but it's really evil and it could really ruin me. And I don't want to think about it because I don't understand it, right? So you don't know what you're doing with your 401k or your 403b or whatever your IRA, whatever your retirement platform is, if you're lucky enough to have one. And you don't really want to find out more about it because it sounds boring and it sounds threatening, and everybody in finance talks in tongues and you can't understand it. They're all talking about Vega and Tobin's Q and all kinds of nonsense. I think the thing that Abby was right. Finance is like unions. It's a democracy, right? So if a company is publicly financed, if they're publicly traded, then they have these thousands or millions of shareholders, and they actually are owners of that corporation. They don't behave like it necessarily. Most people don't even know that they have a proxy, even if they own stock directly. But most people in their 401k own mutual funds. Do those mutual funds vote their proxies? Do they invest sustainably? Most people don't know. There's a lot of spin going on in that. So in the last few years, when sustainable investing became fashionable, a lot of corporations a lot of mutual funds that weren't terribly sustainable started painting themselves bright green. And now you have to be really clever in order to figure out who really is sustainable and who really isn't. That is something you can solve with regulation. But the wellspring of hope, I think, that's there are the millennials, the generation of people who are coming up. My daughter, my son, they want to work for corporations that they can believe in. They don't want to work for a corporation where it's just a matter of getting more money. There are people getting MBAs at Harvard and other places that only want to work for Goldman Sachs. But, except for the people who want to be Gordon Gekko, I think most millennials are really interested in working for a purpose, for their work providing meaning for their lives, not just to live or to buy food. They are people who really do understand that a net zero goal is better than not having one, and who do understand that the pathway to reducing emissions has to be there in addition to some airy-fairy statement about how we intend to be net zero by 2050 with no pathway, right? So I think the idea is these people are often willing to do the work to understand what they're investing in and really can discriminate between the things that are more sustainable and things that aren't. Can anybody in their, it's really hard to use all your spare time where you want to do all kinds of things to spend it learning finance, right? Nobody wants to do that. I don't even want to do that. But if there's an issue that is dear to your heart, my daughter's getting her PhD in climate science, that's dear to her heart. We can enable them, to understand, okay, when ExxonMobil says stuff about climate, don't here's the corporation that does mean it, right? Here's like, Unilever or somebody that really does sort of have a pathway to net zero and explains what it is and has measures and report on it every year. So I think that the hope that we have is that the millennials are going to grow up to be what the boomers aspired to be when they were in their 20s and didn't turn into. So I'm the okay boomer person. I'm part of the generation that was very liberal and very earth first and earth day when we were in college, and then went on and became Gordon Gekko. I hope the millennials of today are smarter than that, because otherwise it's a very dystopian future that they're looking at, and they know it.
We have a couple more questions. I realize we are close to wrapping time, but I wanted to invite Elizabeth Ross Holmstrom to have a quick, if she's still here, if you'd like to ask your question quickly.
Thank you. I am still here. It was really more of a question around gathering and increasing, the velocity of this change, because there's so many initiatives and groups of people that I personally have been learning more and more about over the past 6 or 7 years since I've been involved in changing the way we work. And so I wonder how we connect these different organizations together, and if you're aware of any efforts to do that, so that I think in answer to the earlier question today about what are the things that we can do that have the most impact, how can we do that as a larger collective if we can pull people together in greater numbers to take action, because some of the recommendations today are brilliant.
Julie, you want to do that?
Sure. I mean, we all have networks, and I always look for what's the way that I can insert this in this network without becoming, the turd in the punch bowl that nobody wants to hear from. So I'm always like, for example, so my daughter goes to the University of Colorado. There were a couple of professors that wanted to know a little bit more about finance. I started interacting with them. That got me into talk to the business school. I talked to the business school students about, yes, you can major in finance and be about sustainability. And so I just sort of see whatever opportunities I have, and then I put the nose of the camel under the tent flap and see if you can get the whole camel in there. And oftentimes it does work. We all have different networks. There is a lot of interest on college campuses these days, though I realize that college campuses aren't necessarily the most inclusive places in the world, but they're places, and there are places where lots of people gather and have influence and will influence the future. These are the people that are going to save the world, if anybody is. What my daughter does is she takes let me demonstrate what the greenhouse gas effect is that you can do in a bottle, basically, to grade schools around this area. So whatever the networks are, use them.
Yeah. And I have trouble making the best and highest use of the networks. I have a million networks that I'm connected to. And what I need to do maybe is start to harvest, just make a master list of the names of all the networks and the names of the people who connect me to those networks, and then talk to those people about their networks and make a list. I mean, I think what we haven't done in this community is put together a master list of all the networks, because I know there are a ton of them and they're not talking to each other. And there's never been a better time to network networks. That's what social media is shaped like. That's what it's about. It's a web of webs. And I think that maybe it might be time for us to sort of figure out someone who can create the big master list and start thinking and strategizing about how to deploy it, because the number of people who are singing this song and singing it well and adding things to it that I haven't heard before and so forth is kind of mind-blowing. And going forward, as I continue to be active in this space, I need all those networks.
Bob Dunphy, you had a comment in the chat that I thought you might want to ask the group. Feel free to chime in if you feel so comfortable. Bob, if you're still there, we will give you another opportunity, but also saw that Seamus Finn also had some comments in the chat. Wanted to give Seamus an opportunity to raise them here as well.
Yes, sure. Great to be with you all. Greetings from Washington, D.C. I simply, I think, wanted to point out that there are lots of avenues for those shareholders who want to be active. I'm part of the Interfaith Center for Corporate Responsibility, and we've been around for 50 years. I spoke last Friday at the Cisco meeting, and will speak tomorrow at the Microsoft meeting. So there are lots of organizations like ours and avenues for shareholders who want to be active. I think for me, the challenge is that we've got a real deficit gap in the US when it comes to the number of people who actually vote. And all the times we've tried to encourage them to do that, the results are still pretty miserable. I think the same is true. I mean, one of the avenues to communicate with corporations is through shareholder responsibility and actually spending a little time with the proxy when it comes out. It's much easier now than it was 30 years ago when there was a mountain of paper in my office every day. Right. The other point I want to make is I do want to give a shout out for, the positive things that are happening. We had a great COP27 in Egypt. The COP on biodiversity is going on in Montreal. That's at a much more systemic level. But you've got just tons of people up there, young, old, of all indigenous people from all over the world, putting their heads together to try and teach the rest of us things that we've forgotten. And so I know that's tedious to read some of their stuff, to follow their blogs. They've got some great short films, 5-minute pieces that they're posting on social media. But for me, that's the systemic question that we've got to solve. And so we need all the scientists, we need all the specialists. We just need to be patient with one another. We'll get through this, in my estimation. It's Advent, and I'm hopeful by nature. But we do have to figure out the 1 or 2 or 3 things that you and I are going to do differently come January than what we did this year, and that I think is going to be a key.
Thank you, Seamus. That was perfect. That point was wonderful. It kind of reminded me that one of the things that I've chosen to do, well, actually a lot of them, I just zero-scaped my yard. I live in Colorado. We're in a mega drought. I don't need to be sucking up water to create a lawn. Like I put solar panels on my house. I bought an electric car, and I don't fly unless I have to. Getting on an airplane is the second most carbon intensive thing you can do after having a child, right? So there are personal choices that we can make in our own lives that we can all do, and then make people aware of what they are. You don't necessarily have to do everything all at once. There's places, I have a lot of friends who can't wait to get back out there again, and that involves flying. You can't take a solar powered yacht from Colorado to California, but we all have to do what we can. And even if you just choose a couple of symbolic acts and then learn from there, I mean, every day that passes, there's somebody that writes a top 10 list of things that you can do about climate change, or things that you can do to support or to minimize biodiversity loss. So just getting educated.
By the way,
is one.
Julie, a big shout out to Joan Bavaria, who you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
My friend Pat Daly, who's a Dominican sister, won the Joan
Oh,
Bavaria
Pat's
Award
wonderful.
in 2014. And Pat
And she
passed
has-
on Friday night after a struggle with cancer. So I spent the weekend planning her funeral with members of the family and the sisters up there. But Pat was also a great stalwart in the ICCR world.
She was the person who single-handedly got ExxonMobil to sort of
Correct.
admit some of the dangerous truths in its past about funding climate change and denialism.
That's
I mean,
right.
she, bless her.
Thank you. Thank you.
And so was Joan. Joan was wonderful. Anyway.
I want to give you both an opportunity to share some of your final thoughts and weigh-ins on, basically your work, this conversation, and what you think some key takeaways should be for our circle members as we, oh wait, hold on, sorry, I'm just getting another request. So if we can have, I've just lost the name, I saw Theo send me a message, but if we can have,
Janet.
Theo, why don't I let you chime in?
Yes, yes.
Perfect, okay, yeah. We can,
Janet Duart
chime
Bell.
in.
Sorry, Nicole. Janet Duart Bell had a question that she sent to me privately. She meant to send it to everyone. So I just want to give her a chance before we do wrap things up to ask her question. Janet, are you there?
I am here, and I thank you very much. And I'm sorry to be late to the party, but I've listened to everything. And the question I want to raise, which is always something that's troubling me, it's about income inequality and wealth inequity as being part of what I call everyday invisible discrimination. I said, even those who understand all other forms of discrimination have difficulty really wrapping their heads around what the real meaning of income and wealth inequity and inequality means to people. And I wanted to know, because I feel that they turn a blind eye to these issues, not necessarily intentionally, because they're difficult to understand. And I wanted to ask this, I want to ask these wonderful presenters today if they have any ideas of what can be done to change this mindset and to have people accept that as part of our quest for racial justice?
Well, I can tell you what we've been doing about it because it's been a major issue for us forever. So we use pay and equity as a selection criterion for our funds. Now, one thing you can't do is find out what people make unless the corporation tells you what they make. We petitioned the SEC to make pay gap reporting mandatory. They have not yet acted on it, but they are coming out with a rule on human capital disclosures. We are hopeful that that will be one of the facets. It won't fix it, but if you have to make it public, here's how much I pay men, here's how much I pay women, here's how much I pay white women, here's how much I pay Black women, here's how much I pay Hispanic women on average, do it by all the demographics, by all the levels of jobs in the corporation, then you have, who was it? Which Supreme Court justice said the best disinfectant is sunlight?
Yeah.
You bring sunshine to it, and corporations are forced to admit that, it can do a lot to help overcome it. We've seen that in Britain, which does require pay gap reporting, just gender, unfortunately, at this point, and only for corporations of a certain size in Great Britain. So it's not universal, but it is helping to at least let people understand, well, I just don't want to go to that bank because they pay their women workers worse than their men. There are people who will make choices of what they consume based on that reporting. We've also written letters to the corporations in our portfolios, especially in our women's fund, about pay equity reporting, and we have filed shareholder resolutions asking companies to do a pay audit by demographics and report on that publicly. One of the first companies we got to agree to do that was Apple, and that was when it was the largest company in the world. So it does have influence. And now what Apple will tell you is that we do have pay equity for our US workers. So they're not all the way there yet, but at least we get a report and we see what people are making, we see what the audit found. So that's one of the things you can do as a shareholder.
One of the things about pay inequality and wealth inequality that's really interesting is what you get when you talk about it is a lot of like, well, we can't help it. This is just, it happens. It happens. And if it just randomly happened and weren't systemic, why would it always go to the detriment of women and people of color? Like 100% of the time. So there's nothing like meh about it. That's just nonsense. And so I really do think that it's important that we teach history in spite of all the backlash about that. I mean, I didn't know until I was well into adulthood that the GI Bill didn't attach to people of color. The GI Bill is one of the greatest bits of government intervention and paid off in massive well-being surges across the country, except that we left a whole class of people out of it. And so it worked doubly as social engineering to the benefit of one group and to the disadvantage of another. And there are generations of people who are still trying to climb out of just that gap. It enabled people to own homes. That bit of wealth has translated into college educations and other things for people who were white and who benefited by those programs. So I think we need to teach history better, and we need to do a better job of measuring the ways in which history is still active, very active in the way systemic inequities are playing themselves out. We need to stop pretending everything is neutral and that racism is.
Heather Schatzer has a comment and question. I want to invite Heather to come and join the conversation.
Hi, I'm trying to get my camera to work, but thank you so much for having me. I wanted to ask, we always speak about income inequality or status, so to speak, but there's also a huge, I'm sorry, I have children. There's also a huge gap that goes unspoken about. It's more like a social status inequity. Like, I'm from the South. I'm tattooed. I have red hair. I was trying to put my camera on so you could see, but it's not working today. And I have the worst experiences in Walmart or to the grocery store, the healthcare services that I would receive based on their often wrong, but these assumptions about who or what I am. I've been horribly misjudged, a good portion of my life. And my mom had taught me that there was things like bad and good, and and the kids that shared and the ones that didn't. I didn't know that there was actually an issue with color until later on in my life, because my mama didn't teach me that we were any different from one another. And, you know, I'm very blessed by that, but there is still the other options. There's a whole entire population of people that have, you know, been incarcerated, that are forever shunned and judged and will for always be treated as if they were their worst mistake. And I don't understand why, you know, these, I just feel like they maybe need to be addressed as well, alongside of equally, for the equality purpose, no pun intended, but yeah, all pun intended. There's so many things that need to be addressed for equality to start. And is there an option for someone doing something to take a step forward that might actually start the ball rolling on change?
Why don't I let you
Well,
start, Julie?
Sure. So there was this famous article, I think it was 10 or 15 years ago, that showed that, so they took identical resumes, they just created a few resumes. Then they put these random names on the resumes and sent them to corporations in response to job offers. And they found that even with identical resumes, absolutely identical, the people who were named Emily and Greg were much more likely to get a job than people named Jamal and Lakeisha, or, you know, have Black names, or less likely to get jobs than white names. We are in the age of AI now. We're in an age where it's an algorithm that determines your credit rating. It's an algorithm that depends on where the healthcare dollars are spent. Those things, if we do not build them in ways that take the racial discrimination and the gender discrimination out of it, they are going to be biased. I mean, people tend to pretend that, you know, well, it's an algorithm, so it can't discriminate. It's like the algorithm was built by people, and people always have these things, even if they don't know it. It's called unconscious discrimination or unconscious bias.
And I
so
agree
we have an opportunity to be better. We just need to take it. And we, you know, when you see things like Google firing Timnit Gebru, who brought that to their attention, and then they fired her, this is not a helpful sign, right? Google needs to hear from people to say, no, you need to not only hire her back, but give her a staff and make sure that you get that racism and that sexism out of your algorithm. I know I didn't really address your whole question, but you know, there's always a reason to discriminate against someone, to divide an us from a them, and we need to get past that.
And well, the reason why, in my personal opinion, I would assume it's because of, you know, deliberate misinformation or intentional neglect that's led to these uprising and issues. That's hard to create a bond of trust, which is what everything should have been based on, in order for, you know, in a, you know, unrealistic but realistic world, for everything to run smoothly and copacetically. We've all shattered that amongst one another as human beings. And in order to start that, we can sit around and complain about how unfair it is all day long, but who's going to take the first step, and how serious of a, or how, you know, deep of a position does that need to be? Does it need to start with bereavement support, grief? Does it need to start with within the schools for someone to take a stand and start the change? You see what I mean? Like,
it's just because you don't see someone taking the first step doesn't mean nobody's taking it.
No, I meant like aggressive, or something that would draw everyone's attention, that's unbiased naturally.
And I'll tell you, as a person working in media, there are very few things that draw everyone's attention anymore.
You're right. That's why
it's a fractured and polarized media landscape. And so there's never going to be a single person stepping forward or a single answer. What we need is a critical mass of people who are willing to step forward, each as individuals, sometimes in networks, sometimes in groups, small, medium, and large. And I believe that what you're describing in terms of the fractured trust and all that you're encountering at Walmart and so forth, I've made deep, personal, meaningful relationships with very deeply conservative people. It is my proudest personal quality and history that I have done that. And I have done that by consciously leaving my place of comfort, going to people where they are, listening to them actively and with respect and love in my heart, and asking for the same respect and love in their hearts back as a courtesy, and then taking the time to develop friendships and relationships. And there's no substitute in that for time. There's no substitute. You can't do this at scale. You need to do it one person at a time. But if we all decided to do that, then we would be working at scale. So like, I don't know how to talk about solutions like that are culture wide, because I don't think anything that's genuinely going to help us is going to happen culture wide. It's going to have to happen at the individual level. And with each one of us talking our talk and walking our walk and going out into the world with love and forgiveness in our hearts and finding ways to talk to each other.
I just want to,
Go ahead.
I just wanted to quickly point out that, you know, as I was kind of saying before, like I've met this spicy Abby, but there, you know, the film is an exceptional example of having those kinds of conversations and making a good faith effort at meeting people where they are. And in many ways, the first half hour of the film does that. And I want to thank both of you for really giving us not only your time, but your insight, your self-awareness, your self-reflection, and your really, you know, a piece of yourselves in being so vulnerable and having this conversation. And thank you both for all of those things, and also give you an opportunity to kind of give us your last comments before we wrap this up. So Julie, why don't we start with you?
Oh my gosh, this is where the pressure all comes in. You know, we are all people and we need to find ways to connect with each other. And that, I think once you understand people as people and not as us and them, we can solve these problems. We do have the power to solve the greatest challenges. We just need to use it, and we can't use it in tribes.
Oh, that's beautiful, Julie. And I'll just add, well, one thing is, Julie, I want to be your friend forever. Let's be friends.
Yeah, here, this is a hug.
Yeah, there. And yeah, I mean, I think that we can't, look, I believe in all of us reaching out to each other in love and all of that, but I'm also, as you probably noticed, not shy to criticize what I feel is bad faith and bad actions and bad actors. And so, you know, that doesn't take away from us the obligation of righteousness and righteous anger, well channeled and well expressed. So I do believe there's a role for all of us in the way that we talk about people, the way we talk about things. We need to educate ourselves about the economy and business. We need to understand that the economy is not the weather. It doesn't just happen. We need to relearn how to build an economy that's human-centered. We have an opportunity to invert this economy, to turn it inside out like a shirt. And instead of, you know, increasing the petroleum we use, building an infrastructure of sustainability. I mean, like we have an opportunity to, instead of this highly transactional kind of set of relationships in the service economy, to build a care sector, a whole care sector. Our mayor in New York just announced last week that, oh, in order to solve our mental health on the sidewalk problem, we're just going to start arresting people. That's missing an opportunity. Like, we have to build a network and a sustainable set of solutions around mental health in this country. The needs are enormous. And if we would decide to spend the money on building people up rather than enriching a handful of people, it would be a very different country.
Thank you both so much for your time. I'm in the same boat as Abby. I just want to stay really great friends with both of you. And I just want to thank you on behalf of Global Citizen Circle, and behalf of the incredible team here. And thank you both not only for your time, and thank all of our guests for hanging in there, participating in this conversation, and being a part of really meaningful work. So thank you all for coming. And that concludes our